Yeah, g'day, kia ora, Pastor Carl Bromley down here in the deep south, and I want to talk about the world currently being at an ideological boiling point and share some of my thoughts about what I think is going on, some of the issues and some of the possibilities of what might happen should we continue on this trajectory. I want to talk about the religious ideology of Islam. And I'm going to start by saying I love people who are Muslims. I love all people. I do not hate any person. I love their soul. But I do have concerns of a number of different ideologies, whether it's Marxism, various different religious ideologies, including Islam. So I love the people, but I have an issue with some ideologies which I believe can be and are destructive. We recently saw, just yesterday, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, depending on the timeline, two young, good-looking Palestinian men in their early 20s, young men you'd look at and think these look like lovely young men, apparently break through into Jerusalem from the Palestinian area of Israel, board a bus and shoot up around about 30 people, last count 7 dead, number critically injured, the death toll perhaps rising. And this is nothing new historically at all when it comes to the religious ideology of Islam. History is sadly prolific in such incidents. Now, the issue with conflict in the Middle East is that you're not fighting against a nation, you're not fighting against a country, you're fighting against an ideology. So it's not army against army, it's people who sincerely and genuinely believe in the ideology of their faith and what their book, their religious book, permits them to do, endorses them to do, directs them to do, encourages them to do, and rewards them for doing it should they feel moved, motivated, inspired in their perception of a certain social context. And what I'm talking about is what the religion of Islam permits, entitles, encourages, endorses, and rewards for genuine believers in their book in regards to jihad, or what they call holy war. This first became apparent to me when I met my first Muslim years ago in Christchurch, who came to our church, and I was talking to him about asking him regarding radical Islam, and are those who drive buses filled with people off cliffs yelling Allah Akbar, are they radicals and extremists? Now, this young man who is over in New Zealand working in computer technology looked very baffled and confused about my question, and defensively would not affirm that such behaviour was radical or extreme. He shook his head indignantly that I would suggest that Muslims who were driving buses off cliffs full of people crying Allah Akbar were extremists or radical. I was amazed. I did my best to give him an opportunity to say, yes, this is not Islam, this is radical. And in the same spirit, it's why we see very few Muslims decrying or denouncing jihad of any kind. So within this ideological belief system, because the book that they believe in genuine sincerely endorses, permits, encourages, and rewards jihad, in their view, holy war, which includes killing and murdering the infidel, and an infidel, according to Islam, is anyone who is not a Muslim, is an infidel. So it seems that calling these kind of jihadists, like these two young men in Israel and Jerusalem yesterday, radicalize is a misnomer. It's inaccurate, in my view, because they're actually not radicalized at all. They are motivated and inspired according to a subjective perception in their minds that the social context permits them, endorses them, by divine permission and directive to carry out jihad or acts of violence and murder and killing against those infidels, non-Muslims, if they are so moved to do so. So according to the book they believe in, this kind of behavior is actually not radical. It's an act of submissive obedience, and Muslim means submission. And actually to not obey this subjective conviction for these sincere believers could be perceived as sin and rebellion against Allah. So we're dealing with a religious ideology that the tenets of its own book permits such behavior if the believers and followers of that ideology are so subjectively inspired, motivated, and moved. Now, the problem with that is you're not fighting a war against a nation or a country. It's not one army against another army. At any time and any place, a genuine, sincere believer who has sincerely believed the tenets of that book that permits, endorses, and rewards such behavior if someone feels inspired or moved to jihad, to murder and kill the infidel, non-Muslims. That means at any possible time and place, anyone who genuinely believes that book could be inspired and motivated, not radicalized, because according to the book, it's not radical behavior. It's permitted and appropriate under perceived social context and circumstances. And this is the problem when you're dealing with an ideology like Islam that genuine believers believe in. How do you deal with this? What's the answer? Within the book that they believe in, they are encouraged not to befriend anyone who is not a Muslim, again an infidel. And they're even permitted to lie and to deceive the infidel. So there's a real issue of trust here. How can you trust someone who identifies this ideology when their book that they count as divine tells them not to befriend those who aren't Muslims, genuinely befriend them, and permits them to deceive the infidel to gain traction for their ideology? And lastly, it is a global ideology that seeks a global conquest for Allah. So we see things kicking off massively in the UK. We see it kicking off in Australia. It hasn't kicked off so much here in New Zealand because as long as the government is placating and appeasing this ideology, there's no problem. But as one recent podcast commentator said on YouTube, as soon as this ideology has the upper hand and a majority, or the government of the country no longer panders to it or appeases it, the switch gets flipped and you see uprising. And if possible, you will see Sharia law put in place like we are seeing promoted in some parts of the UK right now, Sharia law, would you believe? So this is concerning. We are seeing the world at a boiling point through this particular ideology. Now, here's a question I want to ask. Who's controlling this ideology, and is it being controlled, and why? Yes, I believe it is being controlled. And famous podcast Trevor Loudon has written about this and spoken about this on Counterpunch many times. He's written books about it. When you think about it, there is a political authority and power that is really utilizing Islam, the ideology of Islam, internationally to forward its political agenda and power to get the upper hand. Those nations, I believe, doing so, predominantly in the major nation doing it, is Russia under Vladimir Putin. If you believe Vladimir Putin's a Christian, then you don't know much about Christianity. He's nominal, but there's nothing Christian about him. He's a leader of a predominantly communist country. Russia under Vladimir Putin and alongside China under Xi Jinping, with perhaps the help of North Korea. These folks are the ones who actually have Islam under the thumb as a political global attack dog and power. Trevor Loudon has written about this and spoken about this before, particularly of Russia. This is why Russia has such close ties with Iran, a designated terrorist nation that funds the Islamic proxies like Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, etc. They are using Islam as an attack dog, in my view, to destabilize their political opposition and enemies, in their view, the Western world. This is why Russia, China, and Iran are side by side, and North Korea. If Russia can support Iran to support these proxy Islamic states against Israel, the USA's ally, they can do a lot to destabilize the West. Now, here's my hypothesis, and that's all it is, thinking about this, wondering about what could happen here. What if Russia, now Russia is depicted as the bear, the northern bear in the Bible that comes down eventually against Israel as a superpower, the Russian bear. What if the Russian bear, Russia, goads China into an arrogant position of pride, thinking that it may have an opportunity to destabilize the USA? And what then if the USA responds and decimates China, but leaving the USA somewhat weakened and crippled by that act? That would allow the Russian bear of the north that the scriptures talk about will come down one day against Israel to carry out that trajectory, will it not? So, it's interesting times, concerning times, boiling point. I would not be surprised at all if Russia, who is using the Islamic states and the ideology of Islam as an attack dog to destabilize the West, may in some way goad China to flexing its muscles in a way that may cause the US to have to respond and pretty much obliterate or destroy or cripple China and leave itself vulnerable to allow Russia, whether under Putin or someone else, then the access to eventually come down and attack Israel, as biblical prophecy demonstrates and prophesies. So there's my thoughts on a world at ideological boiling point. Islam is being used as an attack dog by Russia and perhaps secondarily by China and those communist countries to destabilize the West by attacking America's ally in Israel. And so, folks, this is a difficult thing. It's a difficult thing. As I said to start this video, I love all people, regardless of their ideologies. I love all people, every soul. Jesus Christ died for every soul. I love them all. But I have concerns with ideologies that are destructive, that permit indiscriminate murder and killing because someone is inspired and motivated subjectively to act out of some kind of perceived spiritual crusade, jihad. And when those behaviors are actually not contradicted nor condemned by the very book of the ideology that they ascribe to. That is not radicalized. That's what you call inspired and motivated to do the very thing that your faith in an ideological system and its book permits and even rewards you for doing so. And this is why these acts are celebrated, not condemned, by the majority of those who also align with that ideology. And if there are those who condemn it, I'm sorry, but my skepticism is this: lie to the infidel. Do not befriend them until you have an opportunity to progress your ideology for Allah and work towards the global goal of domination. But that will not happen because of the constraints and control, I believe, ultimately, that are there under Russia, China, and the other globalists actually working hand in hand with Russia and China. There's a reason why countries like Russia and China get a go-free pass card when it comes to climate credits and stuff, because really we have this globalistic situation politically of these globalists with these axis of allies are leaning more now towards Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, and those communist or Islamic ideological states who all have one thing in common that unites them: the destruction of the West. Be in prayer, stay close to Jesus, study your scriptures, eyes wide open. Don't be naive, don't be deceived by what's going on around you. Satan is the father of lies. He's the master of manipulation and deceit. Wake up, be sober, be vigilant, for your adversary, the devil, roams as a lion seeking, a roaring lion, roameth as a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. Do not let him devour you. God bless. Matewa Aranui. Leave a comment and share if you think the video is worthy of it. See ya.